Howdy, soldiers. It's like a little later than I would like to be filming, but you know, I will take no criticism on this point. All right, I am an adult. I have a full-time job. I have summer classes, and I was running errands this weekend. Frankly, I did not have the time. And that's adulthood, baby. I'm caffeinated, I'm vaccinated, and I have my knee brace on. I'm also eating cookies for dinner, and if any of you have a problem with that, I just have one thing to say to you, and that is, you're not my real dad. You're so good. When I first thought up the concept of this video, I was like, ooh, I'll be classy. We're talking about adult books. I'll like put on a collared shirt and like do my hair all nice and like drink wine. And here I am. I don't have a underwire bra on, I'm not wearing pants, and I'm a little hungover still from the weekend. So tonight me, my tea, and my adult acne are here to party. Welcome fellow adults, I'm sure you can relate, and welcome fellow kids, this is what you have to look forward to. In case you don't know me, hi, my name is Rachel, I'm a 25-year-old book blogger, and as you can see from behind me, I read a lot of young adult books. Young adult is my preferred genre, but I also dabble in adult fantasy and sci-fi. And today I just wanted to do a video on some of my favorite adult fantasy books that are written specifically by women. While any book genre is not gendered, historically fantasy novels have been overrun by men and male authors, and now there is a large rise in female and non-binary people creating amazing fantasy worlds that don't get enough credit. First disclaimer is that I am specifically focusing on purely fantasy. I will also not be talking about purely sci-fi, romance, paranormal books, because even though there are a large overlap with those two things, I feel like if I added those in this video, it would be like 3 hours long, and I already can feel that it's going to be at least 20 minutes. Second caveat to this video is that while these books are all written by women or female presenting authors, they do not include, or nor do I think fall under the category of women's literature or women's fiction. I hate the fact that that's its own category because you don't have a men's fiction, that's really just the fiction section, but we're not gonna go into that today. Women's fiction or women's literature tends to focus on female-related topics, like there's a lot of things about like motherhood or like rediscovering yourself, and they always have a female protagonist, whereas some of these do have female protagonists and they're written by female authors, and some of them are written by female authors and have male protagonists. Alright? Done. Number 3. I am not as well versed in the adult fantasy category as I am in the YA fantasy category. So there is a lack of black female authors on this list. There's also a lack of indigenous female authors on this list. I do have one, but we need more, because I find that black female authors in particular are dominating the sci-fi market for adults and really doing well in the YA fantasy. But I wanted to stick purely with adult fantasy. Of course, as of anything, this is what I've been exposed to, and I'm always looking for more recommendations to diversify my shelves. We're gonna start off with one of my personal favorites, and that is the wonderful, the magical V Schwab. Yes, she also writes sci-fi and dystopian and comic books and middle grade and young adult and a whole lot of stuff, but we're focusing on her fantasy books today. A Darker Shade of Magic is one of my all-time favorite series. It is about a blood magician named Kel who travels between 4 alternate reality Londons that all have varying degrees of magic. He acts as a smuggler and one day accidentally smuggles something from one London to another one that he should not have and opens up a interdimensional magic war. As I'm sure you've seen Addie LaRue all over the internet as it came out last year. It's about a girl who makes a deal with a demon to avoid an arranged marriage, only to have the consequence be that nobody ever remembers her and she is also immortal. While there has been some discussion lately on V.E. Schwab's diversity in her books, I still think they stand by themselves quite well. All of her worlds are just so engaging and I think really accessible to younger readers who are trying their hand at regular adult fantasy novels. I think they have a really good crossover potential. They have a lot of interesting magic and family dynamics that I think a lot of people will enjoy. I just realized I'm, going forward being like, another one of my favorite authors, but if I say that, I'm gonna say that for every single book that I hold up. Another fantastic author that you should check out is Alex Hijero, who is the author of 10,000 Doors of January and The Once and Future Witches. 10,000 Doors of January is one of my all-time top 5 favorite fantasy novels. It is so magical, it is so lovely, and it's the kind of whimsical that makes you feel a lot of feelings. And I love that for me. This follows a main character who can open doorways to other worlds, and the way that Alex Hijero tells this story is about all these different worlds, how they connect with our own, the ways that people find connections in small things, worlds that call your name, and finding your way back to places that you once loved. Alex just has such a way with words. Everything she tells is just this beautiful story, and I'm like, what magic? You got magic from another world, and a witch at the same time. That's the only possible, plausible way that you could have made these books happen. They're gorgeous. And then I don't know about you, but I love me some Russian folklore. I love me some winter kings. I love me some deals with demons. Oh, I really do. We're gonna talk about two fantastic Russian folklore inspired books, the first of which being Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. This is a retelling of the folktale of Koshchei the Deathless during World War II, and the way that she weaves history and folktale together is seamless. It goes from low fantasy to high fantasy to absolutely outrageous to whimsical to like horrific, all in 2 chapters. Wow. Catherine Valente also has children's literature out, she has sci-fi out, and I will say she has one of the most unique writing styles that I've ever read. I would highly recommend anything she writes. Her writing has these little unique twists on everything. So the way that she writes, even though it is a little bit more flowery, it always just gets you a little bit at the end of every sentence or every paragraph, and I love kind of having to catch up and keep up with her. And if this book sounds interesting, you are going to absolutely enjoy The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Oh, now that I think about it, she also has another book, which is The Goblin Emperor, which I also really liked. We're not going to talk about this one today, but Goblin Kings and court politics. This is inspired by the folktale of Vasilisa, and we follow a young girl named Vasia and her family who live in the forests of Russia, where Vasia is able to talk to the woodland creatures and spirits, and her life gets upended when a priest comes to town and tries to convert the village to Christianity, and her relationship with the Frost King. This is a full series that does a similar thing to Deathless, where it splits itself between purely historical based plot, I think in a medieval-esque Russia, and we also get to deep dive into the folklore aspect of this. Like, the first book is like, wow, okay, and then you get into the second book and you're like, this is bananas, like, where are we going? We're going to other dimensions, we get frost demons and like these winter horses and like creatures that try to eat you, like, it's wild. Raw and exciting, and there you go through so many strong emotions. The way that she writes her main character, being this fierce kind of warrior maiden, is amazing, especially when it's juxtaposed against those harsh gender or social boundaries that we get to go into later in the book. Alright, so we covered Russia. Now we're going to move across the continent, and we are going to go to Greece and talk about some Greek mythology. I bet you already know which ones I'm talking about. Oh my, Song of Achilles, what are you doing here? Oh my gosh, you brought Cersei too? Ooh, it's a party. Alright, first of all, they're shiny! You can't go wrong with some Madeline Miller. We got The Song of Achilles, which is a retelling of Achilles and Patroclus, which is a beautiful story about bonds of friendship and the Trojan War. And then we have Cersei, which is a retelling of Cersei, who is the witch who curses Odysseus's men in the Odyssey, except it's this like feminist retelling about how women's autonomy was being abused and, you know, coming into your own powers and doing what you have to do to survive as a woman. The way that Madeline writes these books is also a major selling point because I have read a lot of Greek mythology retellings, some of them good, some of them questionable. The way that she writes makes it sound like you're listening to someone tell you this epic. Considering that all of these characters come from their own epics, it's kind of neat to see a new twist on an epic, which is like one of the oldest pieces of literature that we have. So that's cool. Ooh, and then a book that I just finished that like blew me away was The Boneshard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Y'all, this takes place in an empire that's ruled by bone shard magic, where the emperor will scratch things into bone and then like make creatures out of them. And if you couldn't tell, I have a thing for bone magic. And this follows 3 characters across the empire, one of them a smuggler, one of them the emperor's daughter, and one of them a military general. She's high in the military, she's important. As bone magic starts to degrade and everybody suddenly has a new motive to want to eradicate bone magic. This is a combination of a lot of different types of Asian folklore, and the world of this is so unique. Really cool creatures, a really cool world. There's like floating islands that sometimes migrate places or just like disappear. It had amazing pacing because it's just getting higher and higher and higher, and then it was like 50 pages left, then it was like bam, 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 plot twists everywhere, and oh man, I was up until like 2 AM finishing this book because I just could not put it down. Another fantastic author of Asian descent is R.F. Kuang, who writes the Poppy War series. This is the only one I will flat out say in this video has a trigger warning for extreme violence. It's about a girl named Rin who goes off to a special training school and is treated very differently for being part of the peasant class, but it turns out that the gods are real and she's speaking to some of them. If you like academy stories, if you like girls rising up and gaining power over people, if you like old gods coming to life again, would highly recommend this book. It is fast, it is brutal, and it's actually pretty funny, at least in the beginning. She does write part of the story as a parallel to a very violent, bloody part in Chinese history that is very traumatic reading. But considering that the storytelling and the world building and the like pure connections that she writes between some of the students and the teachers, this is still a fantastically written book. I fully need to read the sequels to this book. This video is the wake-up call that I need to finally pick up Dragon Republic. Oh, speaking of dragons, damn, that was a good segue. Let's talk about Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. We gotta talk about this big boy. We have court politics and cultural expectations and religious exploitations and scary flying flat monsters with burning inferno mouths. This is like Game of Thrones, but only the queens. And like a lot better. You can fight me on that statement and I truly do not care. You can take yourself and your negativity out of my household. This follows three women in empires across both seas when an old 1,000-year curse has finally worn off and dragons are resurfacing once again. I love the whole like follow-up 1,000 years later when the curses have worn off. Like, how are those people gonna deal with it? Along with the fact of like one of them is a queen who's trying really hard not to get dethroned, one of them is a sleeper agent, one of them rides the dragons, which is dope as hell. I will also say, I know a lot of people don't want to read this because it's so big, but just to let you know, it's actually broken down into sections, so it's a little bit less intimidating that way. I'd somehow still have more dragons. This is great. All right, hear me out. So if you want steampunk fantasy dragons, which I know you do, I have the series for you, my friend, and that is the Alchemists of Loom saga by Elise Kova. In this industry-based world named Loom, there are 5 guilds that all produce a certain kind of industry, all of which are on the dirty, gritty ground, whereas the dragon kings and queens rule up above in the skies. Our main characters are a half-dragon chimera thief, an engineering apprentice, and the Prince of Dragons himself. In this story full of steel and fire and dirt and grit, we have 2 revolutions, a rebellion in Loom with the regular people and the chimeras against the all-powerful dragon lords who are having their own kind of usurpation of thrones up in the sky. This is a great world because it's very unique, but it's also not inaccessible. The small relationship dynamics between our thief and our apprentice, and eventually our thief and our prince, and the prince and his sister, and how the different kinds of communities and guilds all react together and within one another. I have to mention this here because I just found out that it is going out of print, and that's I'm so sad. I was there when this released, like yes, dogs bark it out, it's very sad. So if you can, that sounds interesting, please go and support her before you can't get this anymore. This is like, oh my god, this is like contraband now. Oh my gosh, I'm a rare collector. See, Rachel, this is what happens when you don't double check your filming script. You end up leaving out full chunks of books. So, you know, here we are a day late. Probably already heard of this very well-renowned book, but I wanted to mention it anyway because it is one of my favorites, and it's Rachel's Selfish Hour, where we talk about my favorite fantasy novels. So let's talk about The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, which is based on Arabic and Middle Eastern folklore and mythology, where the city must rely on this young thief with magical powers. Political games, government structure chaos, and plot twist after plot twist that is going to leave you wrecked. She brings the City of Brass to life with these amazing descriptions of djinn and sand fairies and other kinds of magical desert creatures. Plus the whole series is out, so you can just binge the whole thing after you finish this one, and it's like 3 AM and you have no idea what you're doing. Just a quick, you know, go over to the app store and download that book. And while you're over there and you happen to like this type of Middle Eastern folklore, may I also suggest, man, I am killing it in segues with this video. Let's talk about The Candle and the Flame by Nafisa Azad. I might also be like a little bit biased because I know her. I ran her book event when this book came out, so that's just a very cool memory associated with this. Her imagery and descriptions are impeccable, and our main character Fatima ends up accidentally letting a jinn spirit inhabit her, so she is kind of 2 people at once and is struggling with her old life and her new life as a all-powerful jinn. Excuse me, do you have something to say about this book? Well, if you're gonna yell, you have to at least show your face in a couple seconds, okay? How are we doing? Can we just like pipe down just a little bit so I can finish this segment? Oh good, I'm covered in cat hair now. The world building of the desert nomads, as well as the political structures and world within the palace and also within the city, help to engross you in this story until you are fully sucked in. And third of my favorite Arabian Nights inspired fantasy novels, we have The Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. This is another book that does world building right. Listen up, writers, it's all these tiny details that really create the world and fully immerse your reader in it, no matter where we are. We're literally in a sand cave in the middle of nowhere for like half the book, and yet I'm like, I can see literally in my mind every pathway of this place. I fully believe it's real. Like, just golf claps for Tasha, seriously. We have the Emrithi, which are these nomadic outcasts that descended from Jinn blood, the illegitimate half-Emrithi-blooded daughter of a high governor who is coming into her powers, and oh my god, what forces are going to come after her next? Oh, we have to use wit and skill and develop magic that we didn't know we had, And then there's gonna be a hot guy that's gonna help her do that, because, like, gotta have one of those. This is another book where I would say, like, I need to get myself together to read the sequel, but truly, I just need to get myself together. This portion of the video, I'm sure, is gonna be very choppy because I have one brain cell left, and it is working at maximum capacity. So you will have to forgive me, but you will have to take what you are given, because adulthood at this moment for me is quite difficult, and this is me trying my best, so back to the video. Okay, now I talk about one that you absolutely can still get at the store, I think. At least you should. But you might not be able to because this cover is damn amazing. Black Sun by Rebecca Runhorse is a fantasy series that focuses on the folklore and legends of the native North American indigenous peoples. So we have sun priests and crow cults, which, like, she has siren pirate captains and twisted witches that deal in dark magic. She integrates different kinds of religion, and specifically cults, in with political values and multiple political systems throughout the city, using cultural touchstones and religion in a way that I have never read anything like this before. And she does it in a way that is more violent than I expected, but like in a good way, if that's possible. It's possible. You gotta read this. Oh, is it time for the twins to come out? I think it is! You don't have to be on my channel long to know that The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern is my favorite book. And like The Night Circus is not that far behind. This is also a really good book too. I know a lot of people don't like her books because they're very weird, very prose-y. She tends to do a lot of like flowing metaphors, which I, as a literature student, happen to love. Night Circus is a little bit more tame, I suppose. It is still very whimsical and dark and fantastical. Of course, magic circuses. We have two people who are rivals to lovers who are in this massive creation competition against one another, as well as people who love this circus. And I think this is really good, especially for readers who just like want to be a part of a magical world so badly. We get to see that in the character of Bailey, whereas Starless Sea is all about metaphors and time loops and places that exist on other planes, doorways to other worlds. It's one of the most unique books I've ever read, and it is also my favorite book because it is just so damn gorgeous. While these books might not be at the top of what I would consider fantasy, these are definitely at the top of my list for being the most fantastical, if that makes sense. If you say a book is about magic circuses, I'm gonna buy it. And if you say that there's a book about a library that exists outside of space and time, you know I'm gonna buy it. And finally, it's been over an hour. My voice is going. It is so damn hot in this room that you see, this is like part highlighter, part sweat. The final of my up till now all-time favorite female fantasy writers is Sylvia Moreno Garcia. She writes Mexican Gothic, The Beautiful Ones, and Gods of Jade and Shadow, which I do not have a physical copy of, and yes, I realize this is an absolute tragedy. As far as I've read, all of her books so far have taken place in kind of a mid-century Mexico City that talk about traditional Mexican culture as well as the American influence on that mid-century Mexico, and also focuses on the Mayan and Aztec gods. And of course, me being a white girl, I do not have experience with Mexican culture firsthand, but from what I've read by her, I really like the way that she integrates more traditional culture and folklore in these really dramatic and flamboyant ways, especially when it comes to the gods. I also found out that she lives in Vancouver, which is where I live. So one day when we can all go out without masks on, I will be like watching everybody to see if I can maybe meet her one day on the street. And with that, I am done. So that was fun. There are a lot that we just went through, and I feel I still feel like I missed like half of them, but I guess that's the fun part, right? You get to discover new authors and your tastes may change and that's okay. But as of right now, this is a very good screenshot of some female fantasy authors that I have been enjoying the hell out of. Like I mentioned before, please leave down below some of your favorites. It's got so much more dramatic with this fan because I absolutely do not need any more books. I have zero space on my shelves anymore. We are at maximum capacity. But like, drop those suggestions down below. Also, please leave your favorite POC authors in the comments below because, of course, now, you know, oh, we're moving out of just men writing fantasy and now we're moving into a lot of white women writing fantasy, which is great. You know, I am one. I happen to like them. But I would also like to expand my reading knowledge and, you know, diversify my fantasy shelf because there are so many cultures and traditions and mythologies that are not in, I guess, mainstream public consciousness, and I would like to read about them. Just any mythology you got, just throw it at me. You know where to click to like the video, you know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are all having a nice day or night wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!